So if you're watching this video, you probably got approached about seller financing or a wraparound loan, and you understand the benefits of seller financing for you as a seller. However, there's some risks for the seller here too. And this is the Debbie Downer video where we're going to address some of the risks, the common questions we get about maybe not so positive things of seller financing. So let's start off with number one. What happens if the buyer defaults on the payment, right? What if they just don't pay? What if they, stiff me here and I'm stuck now with a property? Well, foreclosure is the path in which you do that. And the way you want to make sure that you can do a foreclosure, it's not always by default when you have these, is you ask for a deed of trust to be in there too, right? So in that promissory note, it would have that deed of trust outlining that if in default, you could file foreclosure and liquidate yourself from that situation. So the good thing is in Texas where we are, you can have a foreclosure in as little as 42 days or up to 60 days on the high end. It really depends on what time in the month it's filed, notified, all those kinds of things. And of course, if the buyer rectifies themselves and they pay up and they pay the interest payments for being late, all that kind of stuff, no need to foreclose. However, you can get that process started very quickly and get that property liquidated in very little time here in Texas. That's the good thing about being here. The other things too, just to be sure, is that you have a lawyer that is drafting the promissory note and doing it properly. One that's not representing neither you, the seller, nor the buyer. Someone independent party that's doing both sides, representing that. Qualify the buyer before you do this. Have they done deals like this before? Do they have the experience? Maybe do they have the cash position? So on and so forth to be able to sustain this. Are they investors? So on and so forth. And check that out before you go. So what if I get a due on sale clause called on me? Now this is very specific for something called a wrap mortgage. If you're not sure what a wrap mortgage is, go back to our 101 video on seller financing where we walk through the difference between a wrap and a seller finance. But basically here, there was an existing loan already in place on that property, and almost every loan has a clause on it that says due on sale. If the deed is transferred to a new buyer, the lender has the right to call that loan due on sale, and the entire sum of that loan is now due immediately or within 30 days or so, right? Give or take. Now, the fact is this rarely gets called, and I have not had this called yet on any of the properties we've done, so this is not something that happens every day, but it can be done if the bank wished it to be done. So when you're working with a buyer, make sure that they have a plan in place to work with you on what's going to happen if that were to happen, right? If that lender were to call that loan due on sale, they would either bring cash to the transaction, they would need to have personal loans that they could call in, or they could use what's called a hard money loan to be able to pay off that balance, liquidate, and then figure out how they do this. Do they sell the property later, or what do they do, right, to get out from under that situation? But that should never be your problem as a seller. Make sure that the buyer that's requesting seller financing has a plan if that were to happen, okay? Now, this is not really a bad thing. It's just something to consider here when you're a seller and look for other options. Like, hey, I'm gonna have a long delay to get that cash back, and maybe there is a life circumstance that will come a few years from now where I need my cash a little bit faster and I don't want it locked up in this loan. It's not an ideal situation for me. So this is kind of how we approach this in this situation. One, you can ask for some cash to be brought in the sale. So not all of this would be seller financed. You want some cash in the deal. Now that gives you maybe the cash to pay off credit cards, a car loan, some student loans, etc., and gets you some boom right away, right? Now, you can sell that promissory note too. So if you do a seller transaction, a seller finance transaction, immediately, almost within a few months, you're going to get several people mailing you asking if they can buy that promissory note that they saw recorded with the county. So they look these records up and they see you have a loan, and they're going to contact you and say, hey, can I buy that note from you? Because you can then liquidate. Now you won't make, you get your cash principal back for sure. You'll make a little bit less money on interest over time, but you could actually make a good chunk of that in advance and walk away with a pile of cash to spend on whatever life circumstance that happens to you down the road. And then last of all, this is something you can negotiate into your deal. Let's say the buyer comes to you and says, hey, I want this loan amortized over 30 years, but you as the seller are saying, look, I like you and all, but I don't want to be checking my mailbox for money for 30 full years in this. Maybe in 10 years, I want to liquidate and just call it a day because I'm going to retire in 10 years. I don't know, whatever the circumstance is, that's fine. What you could do is have a 30-year payment plan. In other words, it's amortized as if it would be paid out over 30 years, making it smaller payments for that buyer. But in 10 years, that buyer has to then liquidate or refinance that entire loan balance. And that's called a balloon. So a balloon can be done as well. Now, there are rules and laws around that and all that after Dodd-Frank. Make sure that you kind of dive into that. However, this can be an option that gets you a good deal. You get all the benefits of seller finance, but you're not stuck with that thing for 30 full years. Hope this video helps cover a lot of the concerns. If you do have additional concerns, give us a call, reach out to us on our website. Be glad to answer any other questions that you might have around seller financing. If you're an investor or a seller, give us a holler.